Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Come on and shout it. I talk, you talk, we talk. Women talk life. It ain't no surprise. Baby, you could see if you would open up your eyes. You won't understand if you can't open up your mind. So let's stop wasting time when women talk live.
And welcome to another episode of Women's Talk Live. I'm your girl, April J.
I'm SassyScribe.
And I'm KL.
And we have two special guests today, but we're going to get into our little known facts, so we're going to get to them. All right, so our first little known fact. In Sweden, there is a hotel made entirely of ice. It melts in the spring, so a whole new hotel is built every year.
Mm-hmm. I actually saw that on House Hunters International. I actually saw that. Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
The thought of staying in an igloo, because they call it a hotel made of ice, it's an igloo. I highly doubt that's something I would pay my money for.
But
it's like the outdoor bedrooms.
They're
it's
warm
a no.
inside.
Yeah,
It's a no.
I would try it.
It's a no.
I
I went to the little ice places down at the little places and whatnot out in Vegas.
I stayed out in the
Hard
middle.
no.
I stayed out in the middle of Africa.
You was in
Oh
Africa
yeah,
with
that
the
documentary
lions.
was awesome.
Yeah.
You were in the bush.
Yes.
Not doing it.
All right.
She's more adventurous.
All right. Talking to your dog might not be crazy after all. Dogs are highly intelligent, which is true, and can learn some English. Dogs can learn up to 165 words, particularly words with hard T or R. This might explain why dogs recognize the word treat. And that is true, because I had a Yorkie, and he knew everything that I said, especially if he did something, he would just automatically go in.
Well, since that's the case, I'll say shout out to Mason. Mommy misses you. When you see this episode, no, Mommy was thinking of you. And now I understand why sit and down are not your forte. Yeah, I got that part now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right. So our next one is in 2023, approximately 76,000 youth represented the 1.9 million individuals that are incarcerated.
How many? What was that percentage again?
76,000 youth.
Oh,
Wow.
Yep.
that's nationwide.
Nationwide.
Okay. I like the way it just said youth and it didn't say black youth, Latino youth, white. It just said youth across the board.
Oh, well, we're going to get
76,000.
into the
Yes.
breakdown and the demographics with our two
we
resident
are.
experts. So I'm really excited for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So don't go anywhere. We got more Women's Talk Live coming up next.
And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing youth in crisis. So youth in crisis are young people who face imbalanced challenges due to circumstances beyond their control. And we're going to give you a little statistic. So nationally, there are 54% of children ages 3 to 4 that are not in school. And this is from 2017 to 2021 statistics. We have 68% of fourth graders who are not proficient in reading, 74% of eighth graders who are not proficient in math, and 14% of high schoolers are not graduating. So to help unpack the definition of youth in crisis and the impact of those statistics, joining us, we have the founders of the Ryan Learning Institute. It's a premier academic tutoring and mentor program, and we're going to welcome Dr. Dontae Ryan and Miss Antoynica Ryan. And I'm going to give you a little bio about both. So Miss Antoynica Ryan is the co-founder, and she's devoted most of her life to educating youth since around age 10. She's taught everywhere from preschool to middle school, and she spent 18 years at least educating and empowering youth. We also have Dr. Dontae Ryan, who's a Baltimore native, and a graduate of
Polytechnic Institute
Yeah.
in Baltimore City.
yeah,
And
we all know
there's a
why.
backstory as to why these two won't mention.
Because we went to Baltimore City College High School. That one I'll say.
Google that.
Yes.
Google that.
Yeah.
It's a thing in the
It's a-
DMV.
yeah, it's
To
a
his
lot.
credit, Dr. Ryan, you have a baccalaureate degree in electrical engineering and a doctorate in engineering from Morgan State University, MSU.
Mhm.
And you also have 20 years of experience in radio frequency engineering, served as a vice president and chief technology officer of the Ryan Institute, an educational and technology consultation firm that you co-founded with your wife in 2012. It's awesome to have you guys here. I'm really ready to
Thank
deep
you.
dive.
Thank you for helping us.
Just given those statistics, I remember a few years ago, for Baltimore City, statistics came out that we had 5 schools that were zero proficiency in math, reading, and science. And 4 of those were high schools, which to me is offensive in the base, because the core of the educational system or free public school system is to really educate the youth and get them out here for opportunities and prepare them, which is what you guys do. So can you help us unpack some of this and tell us why those statistics really matter?
So, when it comes to the high schools in particular, it's interesting because you can't just simply go off of what the school is doing, right? Because when they get to the high school level, there's a level of apathy that almost sets in with the students, right? So where they don't typically, maybe they don't want to study, their engagement is just not as high, right? And so you got to kind of figure out what's the best way to kind of keep them engaged, right? And so, when I look at that, when I hear that statistic, it's more so, okay, is there a combination of things that we really need to look at? It can't just simply be, the school's not doing their job. Because I really do believe that there's some tremendous high school teachers out there that are really trying their best to try to make the material easy to digest for the students. But also, we got to realize that the students and their families also kind of got to meet it halfway a little bit. And so I think it's really a partnership that we somehow over the years we have begun to lose, right? Where all of a sudden the family is not as engaged in the academics of the students, and so those are some things that we need to take a look at as well.
So what I would like to add is the statistics. Yes, they are what they are. However, it's layers. Levels to it. When you talk about the unprecedented pandemic, you have children who have returned to these schools, and they have not been in school. We have had children that haven't been in school since the pandemic. Still, I've sat in some of our partner schools where a family is just now enrolling their children back into school. Some of them have not even been in school, so they're being assessed on a grade level, and they have none of the prerequisite skills that are needed to perform on these measures that they're using to say that these kids are not. The statistics don't show all of that background. They just say that the kids are not proficient. I believe that in public education, we did our children a disservice the way we returned back to school, because of the different varying levels during the COVID. They should have been. It was an unprecedented time, so they should have been brought back and assessed and grouped, not based on their grade level, but on their ability and what skill set they had. That's the only way it's going to take years to climb out of. They were already behind prior to the pandemic. So then you insert the variable of the pandemic. It's going to take years to climb out of the hole that especially our communities are in with the assessments and the test scores. I mean, they came back literally how they were prior to the pandemic.
So, real quick, sorry. Now I think in a lot of cultures you see, and they invest in their education for children. I don't think we as a nation take that much investment in our education, in our children. It seems like, especially here in Maryland, they invest in certain counties.
Yes,
but
very
I think
much so.
Baltimore City doesn't get that same type of investment. And I'm not saying it's everywhere.
Right.
Well, we had a whole Department of Education who wanted to actually privatize school. I don't want to say the huzzy's name.
Right.
Yes, that's what I called her. But they don't. We see what's going on, and I think we're going to talk about that later in the show, what's going on right now. And Florida, D-U-H, but in Florida. And then when you said that whole twofold process, growing up, my only job was going to school and getting on the principal's honor roll or the honor roll. C's were unacceptable. D's were straight butt whipping. And an E, oh my God, you probably got put out the house.
Also grew up in a time where all of those things were not just indicative for your grades, they were indicative for your character. You couldn't act a certain way in school. You had to listen. Your teachers were people who actually lived in your neighborhood or lived in other neighborhoods that people knew.
I had a mother named Jacqueline Harris.
Yeah.
Period. End of story.
Yep. And
period. End of story.
I will add to that.
But can you save it for the next segment?
Yes.
Save it. We're going to take a quick break and come right back to Women Talk Live and our special guest.
Yeah. Welcome back to Women's Talk. This discussion is just blowing my mind in terms of information. But I do want to address a couple of things that, we talked about before we went off air. And one of those was about, the household and the demographics are now different, especially post-COVID. One of those things is we talk about the family dynamic. We also talk about the fact that, we have teachers in Baltimore City schools. At least I can speak particularly about Baltimore City schools. You have a lot of teachers who are not proficient in the English language. They come from different dialects. They get this thing. And it's what I call our intellectual infrastructure. We don't invest in that. And so when you have these kids who have, grew up in Baltimore City, lead poisoning, attention deficit disorder, ADHD, and then you have teachers
trauma.
who are...
Wait a minute. We don't talk about the trauma of seeing the murders and the violence in the neighborhood.
And the fact that these teachers aren't speaking a dialect that these kids can really understand, they're disengaged, the classroom structure, so many different things. Let's talk about how that actually hinders versus 10 years ago, when we were growing up, like you were talking about Miss Jacqueline, who, really put the fear of God and the benefit of education. I understand you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah, I think you really mentioned a good point, right? There's there could be in some language barriers that a lot of students may face, when it comes to some of their academics. Now, one of the things that I know with us, when we work with students, a lot of things that we're trying to do is help them improve their ability to self-learn, right? And what I mean by that is this: there are certain dynamics and certain things that are happening inside of not just Baltimore City schools, but just schools around the country, right? That our students, they really don't have any control over, right? Their families don't really have much control over it. And so what we try to do is provide some resources to say, hey, this is how you supplement what's going on in those schools, right? So there's tons of free resources out there on the internet that people can use to help supplement some of those things. But it requires...
What if they don't have internet access?
So that's a really good point. So one of the things that we always say is that if, when you realize that there are certain barriers in your way, right? There's a certain level that you have to have within yourself to say, I got to overcome these barriers, right? So whether it's going to the library, again, that shouldn't be the case, right? We understand, we understand that part. But the fact remains that, that is the case. So it may require you to have to go to the library, right? And or utilize other resources that you can get to. Again, we understand that should not be the case in a free society and, in a society where,
our tax dollars are going towards public education.
Exactly.
So when we realize that shouldn't be the case, however, that is the case. And so what we have to realize is that, our determination, our grit, our persistence and all that, we have to overcome those things, right? And we'll start to see things begin to fall in place. And so I'll give you a prime example. So one of the things that our son did when he was in high school, he studied in India, right?
Wow.
The foreign exchange program.
Yeah, he was there for a year.
They still do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
One of the best things for him to see. Why is that? Because over in India, a couple of things. Their education system, not everyone gets a free education. You have to be somewhat wealthy to get education. That's the first thing, right?
Okay.
But then what you see is that the way that, at least what he kind of described to me, was that the way their passing and fail system is structured is that they take one test. And if you pass or fail that test, depends on what you do in that class, right? Yeah. And so that really requires you to really, at times, to really kind of dig your heels in and be on top of your work, right? Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Well, unfortunately, our students, they can't control the trauma that they face. Mm-mm. They can't control the different adversities that they face. But what they can, and what we can do as parents and other, community partners and things of that nature, what we can do is help them develop that persistence to say, you know what, I realize this is the case, but I got to get through it. Right. I can't live like this any longer. Mm-hmm. And I get it. It should not be the case. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, we can't wait for the change. Exactly. Right? We can't wait for the change. And so that's just my personal, perspective on it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things when I work with students, any student that work with me, they know the main thing we want to focus on is mindset. I need you to have a strong mindset because life is going to hit you. Right. And we have no control of when it's going to hit you. Right. Some of us, it hits us in elementary school, middle school, high school, college. Some of us, we don't really feel life until we're an adult. Right. But it hits us at different times. And so the main thing is like, hey, how do we respond to that?
So let me ask you this. I'll address this question to you because, so just a caveat, my background, I was an expert for 25 years in the field of reentry. Mm-hmm. So in terms of people coming home. And one of the biggest things about that whole dynamic is there was a theory of thought, we'll get a little technical, called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yes. And what that basically addresses is the fact that if your basic needs aren't met, those higher thoughts of elevation in terms of, being able to apply yourself in school, being able to be self-affirming or have self-esteem or being able to be the next great philosopher or Basquiat artist. Exactly. Yeah. All of those things are predicated on the base foundation of you having security of food, shelter, and self-autonomy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our kids don't have that. And so they can't aspire to that next level because they're kind of trapped at that base foundational level. How do you feel that that's impacting what we see now, especially post-COVID, when people were more or less, I hate to say the word, trapped with their family and they realized they really didn't like them? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very true. They didn't like them. They met their angels at the teachers' met.
Yeah, you see, Billy really is that kid.
Yes, it is.
So let me just say this. Parents and families, you spend the most time with your child. There is not with our children, there is not a teacher that our child has had that could tell me anything about my child that I didn't already know. Because I know my children like the back of my hand. So if they came to me and say, oh, they're talkative. Oh, absolutely. Both my children have been talkative their entire lives. Why? Because they started reading at 2 and 1 years old. So their level of intellectual, they're born in whatever their setting is. And so now we need to find a way to enrich their education space so that they can thrive and not be behavior problems. And that's what happens with a lot of our children. They're being taught in a way in which we like to learn, not in a way in which should they learn. There's so many learning styles and multiple intelligence. Maslow's hierarchy of need is our base for what we do. We are big on relationship over the instruction. I can't do anything with you, especially our kids. They have to trust you. They have to trust you and know that you care. They'll work hard for you if you show them how much you care about their next level.
All right. Well, I look forward to discussing that in the next segment. We'll be right back.
What's going on? This is D. Foster III, CEO of Wake Up Global Networks and owner of D3 Consultant LLC. I got a question. Have you checked out the Sunday morning Voice of Hope Connection? It's an inspirational time when I give you a word to help you get through the week. If you have not, I encourage you to lock in and connect. Every Sunday, WPBmedianetworks.com. WPBmedianetworks.com, 7 a.m. and then 7:30 a.m. You can connect with me on the Voice of Healing Community Prayer Call. All of that information is on our platforms, the Voice Over Podcast on IG and on TikTok, and the Voice Over Pod on X. I'm waiting. Let's connect.
Welcome back to Women's Talk, and we're going to continue the discussion of youth in crisis. One of the things that I wanted to talk about on this segment was the fact that I remember in grad school, I had wrote a paper called America's Modern Day Slavery, the Cradle to Prison Pipeline. And it was talking about how all of these things that we're talking about now were systematically put in place to really separate our youth from being able to achieve those higher levels of consciousness, those higher levels of educational achievement. And I want to go into the whole issue now with Florida, or Florida, as SassyScribe, says. So they're introducing a new curriculum about the African American history and saying that slavery, had was beneficial to African American people.
Because they learn how to blacksmith, y'all.
Yeah.
While we were
and that
being raped.
angered a lot of teachers and activists because of those very reasons. So I wanted to get your information about what that actually involves, from public schools teaching that the history and evolution of slave codes, a proposed lesson that asks instructors to show students how slaves developed skills, which kind of reinvents history. And so we can go back to the old adage of those who
nice
do not
putting it. Whitewashing history.
Mhm.
It's not reinventing it. It's whitewashing.
It's lying.
Yeah,
It's flat out. It's flat out lying.
And
It is lying.
that
And it,
curriculum was a black professor.
but there's the self.
like us doesn't mean you are of us.
Exactly, because that's the thing.
Skinfolk on kinfolk.
I do want to say two things about that, though. One is, it was 1960 that Ruby Bridges was, this little girl who integrated a public school, an elementary school. So there's a meme going around that says if she's old enough to experience it, your kids are old enough to learn about it. And I think that that's important. But I also think about the adage that those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. And I feel like we're now in that cycle where, we're kind of reverting back to those old mindsets. And so by us not educating our kids, you create a generation of people who aren't able to get jobs, who have no foundational skills. How does that impact?
So I just want to say, first of all, we have access because of, and I don't have my cell phone right here, but this is the conversations I have with the children. You have access to the entire world through the internet. There is no excuse. If you want to learn it, you can learn it. Y'all TikTok dancing and going viral over. Y'all are masters at the technology. We are the culture. We have to stop giving the power to these schools. They are going to teach what they want to teach. They have allowed these parents and families to get comfortable with, we'll educate your children. No, it is your job. Your job as the parent and family to educate your child. And once they get older, even if your parent and family is not, you have access to the information. You have to take ownership. You have to say, I want more. I want to go further. I want to get out of this. I don't want to repeat this cycle. You personally. And so that's when Dr. Ryan says we drill down on the development of their mindset, changing their mindset, changing their thought process, shifting to a growth mindset and not being a victim, because in these other countries, as we mentioned, everybody does not have access to education. Americans do not value education. And it's that simple. It is that simple. And this is why when they come from these other countries and they get the opportunity to come to the land of the living and the free, they run circles around Americans. And this is why they consider immigrants a threat. Because they're going to come here, they're going to lock in, they're going to get everything that they can get, and they are going to bust down on the education and run circles around Americans and take it back to their country every single time.
So, Dr. Ryan, that brings me to another point, because you talk about you deal with the radio frequency, and I really want to deal with the frequency part, because a lot of our kids, we're talking about the self-actualization aspect, but a lot of our kids live with a self finality. Like, they don't see themselves growing past a certain age. They don't see themselves having a future. So when you live in that small box in terms of time frame, I got to get all of this life out in a matter of years. how is that really impacting the mentality and them being able to get all this information with the videos that they see in the media that's projected at them?
So that's why, community partners like the Ryan Institute, like us, and other partners that are out there doing some of the same work, working with youth and really helping them develop. That's why we're really important, right? At the end of the day, we realize, and actually one of the things that my wife and I, we always say was that, listen, we realize that it takes a village to raise a child. And the goal behind the Ryan Institute is really we want to be a part of that village, right? Because we realize, hey, sometimes some parents just have to work a lot of hours, right? And so some of the things that you would like to instill in your child, you just can't because you're at work, right? Or maybe you don't have necessarily the financial resources to do certain things, right? And so community partners, and there's a ton of us all around the country that are really trying to invest in our children, our youth, to really help them develop. What we say is this. The academics is important, but developing some of those soft skills are just as important. How do we resolve conflict so that I don't end up in jail or being murdered, right? How do I, learn how to speak to someone effectively where they don't get offended by what I'm saying, but on the same token, I'm not sugarcoating what I have to say, So all those type of things are very important. Right? And community partners, we are doing that. Those are the things that we are doing. So what I always say to parents is this. Allow us to, be a part of that village. Allow us to help your child or kind of fill some voids in your home that, perhaps you or your husband or what uncles and aunties, grandma, maybe they're not meeting. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. Right? I always say that, thank God my mom had the wherewithal, my stepdad had the wherewithal where they realized, hey, they didn't go to college, but they realized that, hey, we got to get Dontae into some other programs, right? My dad was incarcerated up until I was about 16 years old, and I would go see him all the time in Jessup, Hagerstown, and so forth. But he would always try to drop a little bit of dime on me, a little bit of knowledge on me about Black Boy and Invisible Man and autobiography of Malcolm X, but kind of drop those things. And so it's about kind of filling those gaps that we are not, filling in our homes.
So you guys want to tell people how to get in touch with you if they have kids at home? They want to either be a partner to your program.
Actually, let's when we come back because we gotta get to a commercial break.
I was trying to get y'all in real quick. I'll wait.
Back to Women's Talk Live. This was a very informative. I mean, we always do shows that are very, but this one I think
educational,
very educational.
Very near
We're definitely gonna have to have you guys back because I think there's more that we have not covered.
You're friends of the show now. No getting away now.
So before we get in our final thought, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to.
Follow you on social media, your website.
Yep. So the Ryan Institute, you can find us on Facebook under the Ryan Institute. We're at Learn with Ryan on all other platforms. You could definitely find us via our hashtag I Teach Hope.
Hashtag I Teach Hope. Ryan is RYAN?
Yes, RYAN. Yep.
Okay. And then you have Instagram.
Yep, Learn
Twitter,
with Ryan.
TikTok.
Learn with Ryan on everything.
So Google
Learn with Ryan.
And everything's
spelled the correct way.
Yes. And let me give a shout out to the fact that you guys are married. And I think that is wonderful, awesome. Showing Black love. You guys working together, imparting beauty and love into the community and hope because you teach hope. So I think that's pretty awesome.
17 years in January.
Awesome.
Nice. So you gotta get to your final thought. As they said, the producer's in the ear.
All right, so our final thought is never give up, for that is just the place and time that the tide will turn.
Absolutely.
There you go. This is Women's Talk Live with your girl, Jay.
SassyScribe.
And KL.
And thank you to our guests for being with us today. We definitely will have you back again. So,
Dr. and Mrs. Ryan.
Thank
you very much.
All right, y'all. Join us next time for another episode of Women's Talk Live. We'll see you next time.
Surprise, baby, you could see if you would open up your eyes. You won't